Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Kathy Fitzmaurice from the Central Office, and I'll be your host for today's webinar, Effective Cybersecurity for Little or No Budget, or Security on a Budget. Your microphones and telephones are currently muted to eliminate background noise during the program. We'll take questions throughout the presentation. To ask a question, type it into the question box on your control panel, or if you have a working microphone, raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon and I will unmute you. Today's program is being recorded and will be available through WebMQS in the Shared Resources section. I'd like to thank our PACE SBDC for arranging this webinar, and Raul Brown, a business advisor from PACE, will introduce our speaker, Dr. Darren Hayes. Welcome, Raul.
Hi, welcome everyone. Today's webinar is being brought to you from what Roger Green has called the bucolic environs of Lower Manhattan. Our small business clients are faced with many cybersecurity threats on a daily basis, and the AASBDC's Cybersecurity Initiative aims to weave cybersecurity sensitivities into everyday business practices. To quote from the AASBDC, the SBDC proposes to bring cybersecurity awareness, education, planning, and tools to small business in a meaningful, effective manner, end quote. So the goal is to make cybersecurity issues a part of all advisors' natural talking points. Recently, Rod Piacoda of the Brooklyn SBDC and Tom Morley of Rockland have made efforts to raise our awareness of cybersecurity issues. We have a cybersecurity planning guide, and Tom recently put out a series on 10 ways to approach cybersecurity. So to further this cause, we have with us today Darren Hayes, a professor at our Seidenberg School of Computer Science and Information Systems, located here on the second floor of the PACE campus in Manhattan, what Roger Green would call the pastoral second floor of our building. Among Darren's many initiatives is that he actually just returned from being an expert witness in a cybersecurity-related legal case. He could tell us more about it later on, but I think he would then have to kill us. So maybe we shouldn't ask about it too much. So without further ado, an SBDC welcome for Professor Darren Hayes. Darren?
Thank you, Rolly. I really appreciate the introduction. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present to you. Just to give you a quick kind of synopsis, a summary of my background. Originally worked in the financial services for about a decade, developed a computer forensics program here at Pace University, a track in computer forensics, have a full working computer forensics lab where we have actually conducted investigations. I've worked as a practitioner on both public and private sector investigations and being declared as an expert witness in federal court. So I'm not just an academic, don't just theorize, but also I'm a working practitioner, work in security, and also what's really become very important, particularly because of the rise of ISIS and other jihadist groups, particularly on the internet, is become involved in intelligence gathering, and actually developed a course here at Pace University where we talk about espionage, counterintelligence, smartphone intelligence gathering, that kind of thing. So really, really important topic. And some of those things we're going to touch on today, actually. So I'm going to talk about network security. And one of the things I think to mention first of all is that security doesn't have to be expensive. There's lots of free tools out there. The hackers, the bad guys, they use free information on the internet, and they use a lot of open source intelligence on the internet to profile your company and to decide the best vectors of attack to your organization. So again, it's a question of just knowing what tools are out there and just selecting the right people to help you with your security posture. So one of the tools I want to talk about first of all is a tool called Shodan. So you've probably heard in the news recently about DYN, a company which was attacked, and there were a number of different outages that affect some pretty big companies here in the northeast of the US. And we talked about the Internet of Things and Internet-enabled devices. What Shodan does is it actually allows you to pinpoint Internet-enabled devices, whether it's a webcam or it's some other kind of Internet-enabled device in your area. And I think it's a pretty good idea because you can actually put in the address of your organization or addresses of your different offices or even your home, and it will tell you vulnerable Internet-enabled devices in your area. And so, hate to say it, but even some of my students have actually gone on there and they've actually tapped into webcams in some pretty secure facilities and also other areas. They know about these tools, as do the bad guys. And so, unfortunately, a lot of these Internet-enabled devices like webcams or thermostats have default passwords, which could be like login admin with password admin. So here's an example of kind of the information that you can get. So this is one of those unsecured devices. I gave a presentation not so long ago in Trinidad, and I entered a couple of locations and was able to identify some webcams that were unsecured at some corporations, just to prove a point that companies need to understand what is publicly available out there on the internet. Another thing to be aware of is that information about exploits associated with different hardware devices and software is available out there. So if you purchase an Oracle database, there is a default login and password. And we all assume that our network administrators are going to change those logins and passwords, but believe it or not, a lot of them are a little bit lazy about doing so. And so the bad guys know the default login and password for many of these applications that we think are very secure, but people in the organization have failed to change those default logins and passwords. Exploit Database is a great website because it can tell you lots of different devices, routers that may be in your corporation that may be vulnerable and need to be patched. And so this is a database of all different types of devices and hardware that can be exploited easily. Another helpful website and tool is MX Toolbox. And what MX Toolbox does is you can actually type in the domain name for your organization and it will tell you all the vulnerabilities associated with your website. It's kind of a cursory look. There are other tools like HPE's Fortify or IBM's AppScan, which can do more down and dirty kind of web scanning. But MX Toolbox will show you if there are any misconfigured parts to your website. It also shows the bad guys those misconfigurations as well. Robtex is also a very intriguing website because it will show the whole configuration of your website and any back-end servers like email servers, for example. And you might be quite surprised when you go on the website that your whole DNS is mapped out and available to the public. One of the things, and this came up in a conference with law enforcement that I attended, is to always verify the information that you get. So when you have somebody come in and you have somebody apply for a job, very often we just assume that the documentation that they provide is legitimate. Well, there is a website out there called Alibi Network. You can actually see they have a t-shirt for sale for I think it's $20. It wasn't me. But basically the website will provide you with degree certificates from any university you want. They'll provide you with boarding passes, with theater tickets, whatever you need for your alibi. They will actually print this documentation. And there was a case which involved actually some young college student who was professing to be a doctor, who had a Harvard degree in medicine, and they couldn't figure out why they wanted to find, they knew he was a criminal but couldn't prove it based on the documentation that they had in front of them until somebody actually verified that the documentation was provided by Alibi Network. So don't take things at face value. The other thing is that there's a lot of tools out there which enable hackers and people to spoof identities or to change identities. So one of those tools is a tool called Bluff My Call. And what Bluff My Call enables the user to do is to change their caller ID and even disguise their voice from male voice to a female voice or vice versa. So as you can imagine, that's pretty rough. I mean, I have a friend who's played jokes on me, called me from the White House or the NSA or that kind of thing. But I know that he's joking around. However, somebody sees on Facebook that you just got out of hospital and they change the caller ID to the billing department of a local hospital and say you still have an outstanding invoice and you need to pay it with your credit card or you'll be hearing from a debt collector. People get pretty nervous, okay? And they are very trusting of those caller IDs. So you do need to be aware of sites like this where you can change your caller ID to anything that you want. So there are free tools out there, and we're going to talk about a few of them. I use many, many more than this, but one of those tools for looking for information about individuals is a free tool from Paterva called Maltego. And Maltego is great because you can take an IP address or a phone number or an email address or whatever personally identifiable information you have about an individual. You can just drop it into the user interface in Maltego and it will show you all the other information across the web that's available about that person. So very handy tool. It is used in law enforcement, in the intelligence industry, but you can download it for free. One of the big trends that I've seen, and this has been happening more at the larger corporations, but I think it's definitely worth mentioning, is enabling or developing risk metrics for employees. And there's a lot of companies that have gotten involved in this service and a lot of businesses who are buying this service. And basically what it does is it profiles employees, looks at things like whether they're a frequent business traveler, do they have access to sensitive information like social security numbers, salaries, that kind of thing, but also takes into account other potential risk factors. So is the person going through a divorce? Why is this important? Well, somebody may be more inclined to need money. Does somebody have a child going to college and have to pay big bills? Could they be at risk of turning over personal information for financial gain? So these are things that a lot of big companies are thinking about. So debt, driving under the influence would increase an employee's risk metric. Access control as well, who has access in the organization to certain kinds of information. Please don't misconstrue what I'm saying. I actually gave this presentation down in the Caribbean, and unfortunately one of the reporters who was at the event actually went to a labor trade union and said, this guy from New York is down here saying that we should all monitor employees, and they basically wrote something that wasn't very nice about me. What I'm really just telling you is this is a trend today with companies. They are developing risk metrics for employees, and this helps them to determine employees who may be vulnerable to stealing information or selling that information. Because employees are approached all the time for information. You may have read that story not so long ago about the Morgan Stanley employee who took personal information about high net worth clients, posted it on pastebin.com, and said, here's a little taste of some of the information I have regarding high net worth individuals. If you want to buy a database, go to this website and send me some virtual currency, Litecoin I think it was at the time. So this does happen. Access control. So one of the problems, huge problem in an organization of any size, is what's known as escalating privileges. So an employee leaves one department and they're assigned new privileges, new access to certain types of databases, but their previous privileges are not taken away. And so an employee who moves from department to department has more and more privileges, and those privileges that are no longer needed are not taken away, unfortunately, which is a big problem and increases your risk of exposure. Email links, we're going to talk about phishing scams and how that's still a tried and very productive way of getting access to your organization, intellectual property, or destroying property in your organization. So let's talk a little bit about intelligence gathering. And if there are any questions as we go through this presentation, please feel free to ask me. Kathy, did you see any questions at all?
Not yet, Darren.
Okay, great. And you can hear me all right?
Yes, you sound great.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, good. So a lot of companies have spent huge amounts of money on intelligence gathering, especially in the financial services industry. People are always looking out for threats. You've probably heard about hacktivism and Anonymous, Anti-Sec, LutSec, all these groups that have targeted big businesses, especially the financial companies on Wall Street. Even the Federal Reserve, where all of that personal information for employees of the Federal Reserve was stolen and posted online by one of these hacktivist groups. Therefore, financial companies and other companies, like for example the pharmaceuticals, are a big target for hacktivists or for animal rights groups. So, you know, especially with some of these rising costs of medications, people want to take revenge on many different pharmaceutical companies. And so intelligence is really, really important. So monitoring social media on an ongoing basis is really, really important. And people are being hired in this area, and this is one of the reasons why I developed a course in this at Pace University. So to give you an example, all of the big sports companies, NFL, NHL, MLB, they're all hiring people in cybersecurity and people who will work in intelligence gathering. So there was a case recently where Major League Baseball, they monitor, you know, what's going on social media during the game and before the game and that kind of thing. And there was an instance where somebody posted on Twitter that they had successfully gotten a knife past security. And so they were able to locate that individual in their seat in the stadium and escort them out. And so these are the kinds of threats that they're worried about. They're worried very much about drones, but also just monitoring social media in general. So I have to laugh because I hear a lot of people, especially younger people, talking about the government and how do we trust the government, and the NSA and Edward Snowden has, you know, opened Pandora's box and told us what the NSA has been doing in terms of data collection. I think what's important to remember is that when you look very in depth at the Snowden revelations and his presentations and his information, who is the NSA getting all their information from? Well, they're getting their information from Yahoo, Microsoft, Apple, all of these private sector companies. All these private sector companies who are saying that they are fighting for your personal privacy against the government, but 90% of IT in this country resides in the private sector. And so the government relies on private sector intelligence for their information. It's not a black box that they have with all this information too. So if you are still a little skeptical, you might want to try a tool called Collusion. Collusion is a tool that you can download to your browser. It's available for Mozilla, Chrome, but basically as you go to a website, you can actually see the hundreds of different companies that are collecting information about you from just one website. So there are actually millions of pieces of data that are being collected about one site visit. They monitor how long you spend on one particular part of a website, whether you focus in on a particular part of a website, whether you move your mouse over a particular part of a website, and you'll see very quickly by using this tool, Collusion, or here's another one, Ghostery, how many different types of tracking mechanisms there are to monitor what you do on the internet. And again, this is not the government or the NSA. I also think it's kind of interesting that people worry about your privacy and the government when you can't enter a Disney theme park without giving your fingerprint. Hence, Disney has one of the largest fingerprint databases in the world now. Another thing is that one of the largest voice databases in the world belongs to Apple. It comes from a tool called Siri. And we don't question kind of the collection methods of Apple or Disney. Another device, and you've probably heard about Microsoft fighting the government over a particular email server in the Republic of Ireland recently, but Microsoft, an expose was printed, I believe, in the Washington Post about a year and a half ago, which talked about how the Kinect remained on even when the user had finished playing an Xbox game. Basically, the Xbox was able to profile individuals based on their age, ethnicity. It did emotion recognition. It does logo recognition, so it can see what kind of sports teams or that you like, so that it can market to you more specifically. And so there was it was quite an interesting article talking about how the Kinect profiles people. So if you want to protect your identity on the internet, there are different ways. This is not my name, it is a name of a company out there that protects your online privacy, but basically routes you through a number of different computers across the world so that people can't monitor what you're doing. One of the great tools out there is a tool called FOCA. And what I like about FOCA, not just that it's free, but you can take any kind of document and you can identify if there are any documents that have similar metadata across the web. And that metadata might not just be the name of the author, it could be have a printer's MAC address associated with that particular document. And so if I have a particular document and I'm worried that maybe this document might exist on the web somewhere, I can actually use FOCA to see if there's any documents out there that might look the same. You might be surprised to see how many different documents are being leaked on the internet. I can tell you there are many, I won't say great websites, but very intriguing websites which actually host a lot of classified documents from government agencies, especially three-letter agencies that are classified as secret or top secret. Twitter. So Twitter is a really, really interesting tool for me, and there are many, many people who use Twitter Analytics. And the reason that they use Twitter Analytics is because it gives you so much information about the user, because Twitter have something called an API which allows you to connect to their database of information, and they make that available for free so that you can collect data on any Twitter user that you want. So here's a number of different Twitter analytical tools which help you profile individuals based on what they put in their tweets. So everything from how far do their tweets reach, what kind of profile are the followers of this person who's on Twitter, how appealing are they, what is their emotional state like, where are they tweeting from, how often do they tweet, what particular websites do they tweet about the most, what things do they talk about the most. You can be surprised at how much you can tell about somebody using Twitter analytics. So TwitReach identifies how far your tweets travel. So is somebody in Uzbekistan reading your tweets? Tweets map followers by country, state, or city. Port Twitter matches photos from Flickr that match tweets. Twitonomy, Twitterland identifies top influencers. Mention Map is a great tool because it quickly gives me a visual of you and who your connections are on Twitter. Follow Me is a really great tool because it actually provides a word map of the topics that you talk about the most in your tweets, but also, I'll just go to this one first. It tells me the name of that account, tells me when that account was created, date and time, how many tweets, how many followers, how many are following, topics, replies, tweets with mentions, most liked domains, and your attitude. Are you a positive person? Are you a negative person? But one of the things that's interesting for me is the device that you use to tweet. So it will tell me whether you're tweeting with an iPad or an iPhone or a Samsung Galaxy, so that if you're a suspect and you're probably going to be arrested, there's a plan for the device that's going to be examined once that happens. I'll just go back here to Creepy. Creepy is an interesting tool because, again, I mentioned Twitter makes their application freely available to the public. You can actually create your own simple application, and you can use this to track somebody throughout the day using Twitter. Interestingly enough, there are many, many tools out there that will actually collect information about where you go during the day. So if you have the Starbucks app, that's continually pinging you throughout the day to identify where you are. That's how, when you open it, it tells you the nearest location to you. What people don't realize is it could be used to track you. So if you know more about privacy and you know about how you can be tracked and your location can be monitored and how you can be stalked, then you understand how to prepare better to be more secure in your environment, personally and at work. So one of the things that's really grown to be very popular and is really, really important are hacker dumps. And the question you should ask is, how often do you monitor these hacker dumps? So Pastebin is a very well-known one, so people will put lots of personal information out there about individuals. A lot of vindictive people go on, they put personal information about people, steal account information, that kind of thing. One of the saddest parts about Pastebin and other hacker dumps is the fact that they're used for doxing attacks. So for example, in the Occupy LA protests, the protesters felt that they were manhandled by the LAPD, and so what the online hacktivists did was they collected all the personal information they could from senior police officers, captains, lieutenants, the LAPD, and they took all that information and they posted it online to sites like Pastebin. So this information included where they live, their cell phone number, the names of their children, the social security numbers, mobile phone numbers, bank account numbers, bank account balances, some really, really tough things to deal with. But there is a Twitter account for Payspin. It's called Payspin Leaks, and there's also Payspin, so you can monitor what information has been leaked about companies. And then there's other websites which are similar to Payspin, like Slexi or like RaiderSec, or Just Paste It. So Just Paste It is another very popular website, just as popular as Payspin. And then there's WikiLeaks. So we hear about Hillary's emails, but there's many other dumps that are put on WikiLeaks. And incidentally, WikiLeaks was actually originally developed as an anonymous online portal for Chinese dissidents. So a lot of people think of it as just merely, primarily focused on US leaked information, but that's really how it started up, and that's really why Tor was, or the dark web was, developed by the Department of Defense. It was for Chinese dissidents to anonymously leak information. So what are some other ways of gathering open source intelligence on the web? So when I help a company do some consulting and I profile a company, tell them all the information that's available about them, that's readily available to a hacker who's trying to profile and attack them. One of the great sources of information are job postings. Because I go into a job posting, I can see the technical skills that you're looking for in a candidate, and then it can tell me the types of hardware and software that you're running. Tech forums, so whenever your network administrator runs into problems with the particular system, they ask their friends on tech forums. By monitoring these tech forums, I can then see the kinds of vulnerabilities that you have with your systems, or the kinds of problems that you're encountering. So you've got to think about how well you're monitoring that from your corporate perspective. LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great source of information, and there are some great analytics that you can get from LinkedIn. There was a product that LinkedIn was selling called Jigsaw, and for $25,000 you could get the whole LinkedIn database, all of the user information. It's not a lot of money for thousands of profiles, maybe millions of profiles, I'm sure. But I can tell a lot of people from their connections. And I actually set up recently for a presentation that I gave, I set up a social engineering experiment where I created a fake profile and I contacted people in industry. I actually picked a high up executive position and first of all contacted people not from the company I was working with, but my previous so-called employer. And I was able to connect with, specifically focused on people in risk and compliance at financial institutions. And it was surprising. You would think that people in risk and compliance would know better than to accept an invitation from a fake profile. But what do people do? They look to see if other people they know are connected to that profile. Oh, well then it must be trustworthy. Or if it's somebody who's high up in a bank, well, they're obviously a trusted person and their profile looks legitimate. But then you can start getting information about people's contacts. You can get, a lot of people use their corporate email, and LinkedIn has been used for numerous different attacks, especially on critical infrastructure. One of the things that I got help with from somebody who was with the Defense Intelligence Agency showed me how to quickly identify people involved in the Iranian nuclear program because they have their profiles on LinkedIn. You can find all kinds of criminals, all kinds of devious people on LinkedIn, but you can also easily profile a company and its employees by going through LinkedIn. We actually successfully profiled very well an energy company, very large energy company here in the US, using things like tech forums, job postings, LinkedIn, and other different tools like Maltego and FOCA. And once we know everything about your network and your employees, it's very easy to attack your company. Whois.net gives me information about your website and your network. Honeypots, as I mentioned, creating a fake profile to attract your employees. And it's a good exercise for you to run. You should run things like red team exercises to see how vulnerable or open to sharing information your employees are. And maybe with a smaller company it's a little easier. Domino's, actually, the pizza place actually has probably the largest one of the largest phone databases in the US and the world. I mean, at the end of the day, how many people have not ordered a pizza from Domino's, right? And so how do I get information from Domino's? Well, I talked about bluff my call before. If you know the phone number for a particular suspect and you call Domino's using bluff my call, change your caller ID, they will answer the phone and say, hey, Mr. Jones, are you still at 123 Strand Street? And suddenly you have the address for that individual. Another thing that people don't realize is that they can request invoices from past car rentals. So you can actually go online, and if you know the person's license number, you can actually see all the places where they rented cars. Security is not very good. Craigslist, take a phone number from an applicant. So somebody's applying for a job with your organization. You know, what are they doing on Craigslist? Do they have any particular nefarious activities that they're doing on Craigslist? Another thing is Amazon. Amazon, we all like to add things to a wish list, but a lot of people don't realize that by default that wish list is public. So I can go on to somebody's profile and I can see kind of some of the things that they're interested in, or the books that they're interested in. And people do this. So if there's a suspected jihadi terrorist, they will see kind of what books are on their wish list. Social media, we talked about Twitter before, but there are other sites like Spokeo, Pipple, Skippies, Facebook, which also provide helpful information. You can actually, people are very open about drug use on Facebook. There's a lot of criminal operations on Facebook today. Still a very good source of information. So talked about red team exercises. I've been involved in these as well. Physical security is just as important as cybersecurity. So when I talk about this intelligence gathering class that I teach, I also bring in human intelligence officers from the US government and from foreign governments to talk about some of the tactics that they use to elicit information from employees. Bar scene is a really good place to carry out intelligence gathering. People generally have their guard down after work, and there are many different things that intelligence officers can use to gather information. Courier, so who won't let the UPS guy in or the FedEx guy, and I know intelligence people in industry who actually have all these uniforms, the FedEx, the Con Ed uniforms, and it's quite easy to get into buildings with that. Fire alarms are another way of getting into a building. People evacuate, somebody else goes in to gather information. Some of the weakest links as well, sometimes it's easy to go in as some kind of industrial cleaner after hours and collect information. Dumpster diving is a big problem in terms of stealing intellectual property. People go through the trash to find information about your company and what your company is doing. The wheelchair is another great social engineering trick. People generally won't stop And if somebody in a wheelchair has forgotten their pass, you know, they won't make them go back out to the parking lot and get their pass. And it's very easy to hide a laptop underneath the seat of a wheelchair. And they prey upon people's weaknesses. You know, we like to help people, and it's in our, we try to be humane, and we often don't ask enough questions in terms of physical security. Threaten or instill fear. So it's very easy to call up customer support in an organization and demand, pose as a senior executive and demand that your login and password be reset. And the person who's making $12 an hour starts to get worried and asks a couple of questions, and the person who's posing as an executive says, well, if you don't do that, you're going to be working somewhere else tomorrow because you'll be fired. Instilling fear is another tactic used by many people trying to gain access to an organization's network. Cyber attacks, we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Backtrack, there's many different social engineering free tools out there that you can use. So, you know, there's Kali Linux, and that has the whole suite of social engineering tools where you can actually do a phishing attack on your employees and see how effective that is. So what kind of phishing attacks are there? There's phishing, there's spear phishing, there's smishing, there's whaling, there's ice phishing. Don't worry, I won't be testing anybody on this afterwards. But basically, phishing is just where you send kind of generic emails with a link out to millions of people and hope that somebody clicks on that. So that's kind of your typical Nigerian prince who wants to share his fortune with you. But there's spear phishing, which is pretty successful. Spear phishing, what it does is it takes personal information about a particular employee and uses that information to target a specific employee. So for example, I've seen on Facebook that your birthday's coming up, and I send you an e-card from a fellow, what looks like a fellow employee. It's very easy to mimic somebody's email address. You click the e-card and suddenly I have access to your computer and the network that you're working on. Smishing is growing in popularity. It is links that are sent through SMS. One of the more popular ones is that you've won a $50 Target gift card, that kind of smishing attack, and so people can gain access to your phone that way. Whaling is a phishing attack that is targeted at senior executives in a corporation. That's what whaling is. And then ice phishing is getting access to the email server of a corporation, which allows me basically to play havoc through your email system. Sorry, I hope I'm not depressing anybody on this webinar. Stay positive. Bluetooth, I would just say that if you are not using your Bluetooth, turn it off, because many default passwords associated with Bluetooth, very easy to access somebody's device through Bluetooth. iBeacons, a lot of people don't realize that with the iPhone, if you start to read the developer notes put out by Apple, it actually says that they can track you in your own home based on Bluetooth devices that you come in contact with. So Apple, who's trying to protect all our privacy, are actually able to tell which room of your house you're in currently. Lots of different attacks. You can take a look at those at your leisure, but again, be careful about having your Bluetooth on. It's a big vulnerability for hackers. So wireless vulnerabilities. One of the tools out there is a very interesting tool called the Pineapple, and the Pineapple is sold by Hack5. Basically, is an access point, and you can call an access point anything you want. So I'm at Pace University. I could call this Pace University public Wi-Fi, set up my Pineapple, and the Pineapple device always acts like it is the strongest access point in the area. And so all traffic will actually go through the Pineapple. And so all your smartphone communications, laptop communications, any kind of wireless activity will go through that. Something called a NIMSI catcher. NIMSI catcher will basically capture information from smartphones, your IMSI, which identifies you on a cellular network and can capture your communications. People do use these RFID tags. So in New York State, licenses now have an RFID tag. Only problem with RFID is that there's no security built in. So you've probably seen these wallets advertised which prevent your RFID signals getting out. There is a purpose behind these because there are videos on YouTube where people can download information from your license or your US passport now, which has an RFID tag, and get your personal information. So it's not that difficult. Raspberry Pi is something we've also used. It's kind of like a small mini computer, costs about $40, but you can actually do a lot of vulnerability testing. So if you get a Raspberry Pi, which again is like a mini computer, you can just hook it up to any kind of monitor. You can actually get security distributions for free, put them on an SD card, and you can use Wireshark. You can test lots of things about your network and its vulnerabilities. Again, that is really good network security testing on a budget. So just to mention some cool apps, and I'll go through this pretty quickly because I know we're a little short on time. Local Scope is a tool for iPhone. Basically, you got to see it to really understand how creepy this is. But basically, you can select any number of about 20 different social media applications, and it will show you everybody in your area who is using Facebook, Instagram, Google, any of these tools. And you just click on somebody next to you, and it will bring up their account and show you information about that person. It even has augmented reality, so you can pan around the room and see who's uploading something to Facebook, who is tweeting about something right this second, and you can actually see what that person is saying in real time. It's pretty cool. Net Analyzer is an interesting tool, and there are many other tools like this, not just for iPhone, but for Android, which enable you to connect to an access point and then see all the different devices that are connected to that access point. So I can see everybody's iPhone or Android or laptop that's connected to that wireless access point. KeyMe is a really interesting app because it allows you to take a photograph of any key, and you just press the send button, and it will send a picture of that key to a local locksmith who will make a copy of that key within an hour for you. So you can imagine it's probably not a good idea to leave keys on a bar or in a public space where somebody could actually use this app and quickly make a copy. Agent Shodan is a tool which identifies if there are any IMSI catchers in your area, people trying to collect information about you. VaultyStocks is another intriguing app because it is actually an app that monitors the stock market and stocks, but it's actually really a disguised app because it's really for sharing sensitive files and messaging people. There are other similar apps out there that look like calculators but are actually used for a different purpose entirely. Burner is an interesting app as well. It's kind of like Bluff My Call. It enables you to change your caller ID to anything you want. Bluetooth Smart Scanner allows you to scan any Bluetooth-enabled devices in the area. mSpy is a tool that's highly illegal, but it's come up in cases that I've been involved in. So particularly it happens in divorce cases. Somebody installs the app, and basically through a web interface you can access everything that that person does on the phone, from email to web searching to listening to their phone calls. A lot of parents put it on their kids' phones to track them and see what they're doing. But after you install it, within 40 minutes, it's up and running, and it runs in stealth mode, meaning there's no icon associated with that application. So it's only when I do a forensic analysis that I can actually see that. Dead Tone is an app that you can install where anybody calls your phone, it plays a message saying this number is no longer in service. It has, I guess, good implications. Some people say it's good for victims of cyberbullying, but it's a way to stop being annoyed by different people, and you can tell people that they're going to hear this message, but that's still your number. Network Spoofer allows you to change website on a computer. Let's go through here. Okay, these are all great tools available for little or no money. Some security tips. Disable the control panel from your lock screen. This is if you have an iPhone. Don't allow somebody to bring up the control panel from a locked screen, otherwise they can get information. One of the things that we do is we try to get information about a suspect when the phone is locked and they're uncooperative. We can ask Siri certain questions and get some information about your contacts and that kind of thing. Siri can be helpful at times when you can't get access to the phone. There's another app out there called Who Touched My iPhone. Basically, if somebody touches your iPhone, it takes a photograph of the person. Something to think about. Find the iPhone app is a good one as well. Make sure you have your auto wipe on, so after 3 unsuccessful tries of a PIN number, wipe the phone. You can password protect smartphones. A lot of people just think of the PIN number, which is very easy to crack, particularly on an Android. But think about having a password that really, really makes a huge difference in terms of smartphone security. If your organization uses iPhones, Apple Configurator is a free mobile device manager. So you can manage all the devices in your organization with this tool. It's a free tool, and you can basically limit your employees to what they can download. You can put your logo on the lock screen. You can basically configure phones whatever way you like. You can even use it at home, so you can restrict use of your kids' use of the iPad that you have at home, or that kind of thing as well. So it can be home-based or enterprise-based. Disable location services we mentioned before, disable Bluetooth. Buy a cheap phone for business or personal travel and then throw away that phone, or think about having loaner phones or loaner laptops for business travel, because all kinds of things happen to devices after trips abroad. Trends in cybercrime. Just go through this very quickly. Mobile malware is growing. It's been underreported because of a lack of detection and because of very poor antivirus software available for smartphones. It's a huge problem. Destructive malware is a big problem, just malware that comes in to destroy information on servers. Phishing, as I mentioned before. Internet of Things, we mentioned before. IP theft is a huge problem. Doxing, I mentioned before, stealing personal information of employees and posting that online. Electronic health records, very, very big market for that. So typically you can buy stolen credit card numbers for about as little as $2 a piece. Electronic health records can go for about $50 a record. Crypto and virtual currencies are the currency of choice for criminals today, and it's not just Bitcoin, it's many different virtual currencies. There's even kids games like Moshi Monsters where criminals buy these rocks in that game and they give these rocks to other game players, or even online poker where you play against somebody, one of these online poker games, and you actually on purpose be a bad poker player so that you can launder money and give somebody money across the internet. Some cool gadgets. Recently visited a lab in Europe and they were showing me some of the things that they have taken off travelers or criminals. The object on the left looks like a typical iPhone, but it's actually a stun gun that gives out 23,000 volts. It's used by drug dealers who go abroad who are worried about carrying a gun through customs but can bring something that looks like an iPhone through. This device in the middle here, it's become very popular. You can get them on Amazon. Put a SIM card and a memory card in there and it's a listening device. And you can actually call the device and you can hear people in real time through this device. It's a listening device. And then on the right is a USB stick that basically sends out, I forget how many volts, but basically you plug it into a computer and it basically destroys the motherboard with high voltage. Very quickly, sorry, I know we're short on time, but domain name monitoring. So people do create domain names that look like yours so that they can send out phishing scams with domain names that look real. Think about, training individuals specifically about clicking on links. Software patches are really, really important. The bad guys have figured out that Windows updates automatically, but people, when they are asked to update Java or Adobe, click remind me later. Some other tips for personal security, long passwords, any password with a space is good. Business cards, people are more reluctant than ever to give out business cards because people have used those to gain entry to certain facilities. Think about photos. You share photos, you're giving out the type of device that you use to take that picture, the make, model, serial number of that device, and also your location where that picture was taken. If you want to learn more, I have come out with a book which kind of delves into many of these issues. Sorry if I went over a little bit of time, Kathy, but I am available for questions.
Great, thank you, Darren. Does anybody have any questions for Darren or any comments?
Okay.
Andrea, did you have a question? Oh, Vanessa said excellent. Excellent job.
So I guess one of the points that Raleigh was making is some businesses only have a few people, 2, 3 people. Again, I guess the message is there's lots of free resources out there. Where you just got to do some research yourself about improving your security because and picking the right vendor. And sometimes you can reach out to different organizations, even the FBI, when picking a vendor and asking them for advice, they will provide advice to you.
Darren, we do have a question.
Sure.
Andrea wants to know how Raspberry Pi could be a network security testing device. Could you give a practical example?
Sure. So there is, the Raspberry Pi costs about $40. You can connect any keyboard to it. There's like even a small wireless keyboard for about $20. You can connect the Raspberry Pi to any monitor then. There is a security distribution out there. I'm trying to think of what the name of it is, but you download that distribution to an SD card and run it from that SD card. So basically the Raspberry Pi has wireless capabilities and there's a lot of different tools on that distribution like Wireshark and other penetration testing tools which enable you to identify any kind of vulnerabilities on your network.
Did that answer? Okay, Andrea, thanks you. Any other questions? Well, that was really quite an eye-opening presentation, Darren. It was very interesting and very informative. So thank you very much for presenting today. And thank you, Raul, for your assistance, and Andrew for your assistance in setting up this presentation. So this